So Michelle says hi from Florida. How do you feel about scripting? But I'm not 100% sure that what you mean by scripting is what I think scripting means. So let's see. But they go on to say, my daughter is 17 and I did one sentence per day, 5 each week while on lockdown. I'm guessing that it's like a sentence that you taught her, that you scripted it out for her and taught to her is what you mean by scripting. And she goes on to say she uses them now at school, but the speech therapists here don't use this. So when I think of scripting, I think of it as being like echolalia and movie talk, where the child just says something that they've heard and they don't understand what it means. Teaching them a rote phrase that they can say at different times of the day, does that count as scripting? Is it the same thing?
No, it's not the same thing. It's more of a method of teaching her to use language, you know? Um, she's 17, so you're not going to go through the basics. Like if your child was 3, we would probably work on the flexibility and changing all these different ways. But at 17, they're teens growing into adults, and they know what they want. And chances are you as a parent know what they want to. So by using this method of teaching a sentence for different situations does work. It's a very quick way. It's just that the speech therapist may be wanting to work on maybe the pragmatics of it. You know, when you change your language according to the social situation, or when you're changing your language so that it's not a memorized phrase. And or maybe you're teaching the script and your child doesn't need a script, because it's like, how many of you, when you were learning your ABCs, thought LMNOP was one letter?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Everyone. And it's the same thing. Like when I get little kids, and when I used to do a lot of therapy, the first kids that would come in, if they talked, they all thought 1, 2, 3 was one number.
Interesting.
Because people say 1, 2, 3, go, or 1, 2, 3, whatever. And so and it's the same way a lot of parents use the kid's name. So if they don't know sit down, but they know Tommy sit down, and they just think Tommy sit down means sit down, they don't Tommy is a name. So sometimes scripting, when you're teaching it this way, like one sentence per activity or one sentence per manned request of what they want, so our kids will chunk language and think that all those words means one thing. And so when you go and you start trying to make some changes, so instead of saying, can I have juice, and teaching them to say, can I have a ball, they'll say, can I have a juice ball? Because they think like it's all one. It's in the linguistic world, it's chunking language when you take one set and you just learn it for something. But for our adults, I have taught older, like 20-something-year-olds, where it is faster to get them access, and it teaches them to communicate. So, and when you meet that communication ability, a lot of problem behaviors go away. And that's a valid way of teaching language. It's just that if you want some flexibility in the language, or if you want her to start learning other types of language as an extension, you will have to go and teach every single sentence for her to communicate, and that would be hard. To get needs met, it's okay.
Part of it, and I always have to give the disclaimer, I love speech therapists and I love OTs, right? But I do think that a lot of times we have an expectation when we go to them, because I think sometimes we're thinking that they're all the very best speech person. I know some speech therapists that work on developing conversational language and do it beautifully. But I think it's the exception, not the rule. I think that most speech therapists think of themselves as people who are facilitating the vocalization of speech. They're going to work on what I call diction, what they call articulation, right? And they're going to work on, some of them work on pragmatics, but a lot of them don't. And I hear this time and time again from parents, that what parents want, we say we want our kids to talk, but that's not really what we want. We want our kids to be able to have conversation and tell us what they think and get their needs met. And I think that sometimes speech therapists are really focused and in a groove where they're trying to get your child to produce sound that can be understood. And I think that those two things, while they are parallel and they have a lot to do with each other, I don't think that all speech therapists are equipped to give parents what it is that they're really looking for. And I do want to make the case that ABA can. Because I think what you're doing with your daughter is great. I think that most adults do this. I was a very shy, I know this is shocking to everyone. I'm still socially very shy, but I've been taught workarounds so that I know that if I'm at a party and I'm like, I don't know what to say, I've got like a drop down menu in my head of 20 things that are conversation starters that I can say to somebody. And I learned those by rote. I think it's perfectly acceptable to give our kids things to say. And then, we want to make sure that they understand what those things mean and what the consequences of saying those things are, right? But I think it's great to give them starters, and a phrase to say like, my son has a very particular order at In-N-Out, and it took us years to get him to be able to say it in the way that they understood, not the way that he languages it, but the way that they understood that this is how he wants his burger. I think it's great to teach them those things. I think that your expectation that the speech teacher is going to teach it sounds like they're not going to. Some might, but it sounds like this person isn't going to do it. But I think that they're going to work on other things that might be valuable for your daughter, but you should still, I think, don't you, Evelyn, that she could still be working on it in this way at home. Just don't expect the speech teacher to do it.
Yeah, and one of the things you can do is a lot of times, speech people they have a goal and they don't necessarily share that goal with the parents. They have an idea of what they want these children to do. And even though there's interview and you get to know each other, I realize that the goals of the speech therapist don't always match the goals of the parents. And so it would be good for you to ask them, like, what are the goals that you have for her? And see if you agree with them. And then also see, you're going to be evaluating for your daughter, how useful is it? And then there are some speech therapists still out there who actually, they kind of treat all their patients in the same way, but they don't realize that with autism, there are specific ways that work better than others. And so sometimes there are, the younger speech therapists now are all trained, not all, but a lot of them do get some training about what ASD is. But the older speech therapists, a lot of them I still encounter still really don't understand what autism is. So when they're trying to teach in a more linguistic way, which how they've taught to somebody with autism, as opposed to the useful way, which is more of what ABA is starting with what language is useful. Sometimes they don't, and when you start with something so abstract, people on the spectrum have a hard time understanding what they're actually trying to get at, because it's a linguistic understanding of what speech is versus more of the ABA, which starts with, no, we need to work on communication and it has to be meaningful first. And then we can talk about, anything that's a little bit more abstract surrounding it. So yeah, you're doing this at home.
Yeah, and I love that mom says she does. She works with her every day. You're doing a great job. And I think, I have a friend who has an expression. She's like, don't go to the hardware store looking for spaghetti and milk. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times as parents, we go to the speech therapist and speech and language pathologist, and we think that we're going to work up on to making conversation and to helping our kids to be able to converse in their day-to-day situations. Sometimes it is going to the hardware store looking for spaghetti and milk, but that what you're doing is working. You keep doing what you're doing, Mom, because that's wonderful.
Hey, thanks for watching Autism Live. To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.